less visible. So, with Adams at the helm and like his plan for the country that he announces, we're seeing the beginning of a new two-party system. Historians call it the second two-party system in the United States. So the first two-party system is dead, Federalists are gone. The new one consists of Adams, Clay, and their followers. They called themselves National Republicans. Andrew Jackson and his supporters, the Democratic Republicans. You've heard that term before, right? Thomas Jefferson's crowd. Later, they dropped off the word Republicans and simply went with Democrat. So, with the new second party system is coming into place. Okay. I want to share one thing with you from Mr. Adams' presidency because we're going to compare it later on. So, 1826, the short version is to say that Mr. Adams faced off against the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia flexes its muscles, and the President of the United States backed off. Well, like, okay, man, okay, whatever. So, here's how that played out. 1825, a federal Indian commissioner signed a fraudulent Treaty of Indian Springs with a group of Creek chieftains. Through this fraudulent treaty, the Creeks lost almost 5 million acres of land. So, it comes on Adams's desk, he signs it, but then he's like, wait, what? I better look into this. So, before handing the paper off to anybody else, he conducts an inquiry. He discovers, no surprise to you and I, that most of the Creeks had opposed the treaty because it royally screwed them over. They're like, of course we don't like that one. Don't like it at all. So, in this case, the President of the United States says, okay, thank you for that information, dear Native Americans. Now I know you are not in favor of this. I shall run it through my paper shredder. So then, state of Georgia gets very, very cranky. Adams, he's like, I'm a career diplomat. I can make a new treaty that's fair to the Native Americans. So, the new one, the Treaty of Washington, was created in 1826. So, the Georgia State Legislature gets very upset and says, the president can't do that. His treaty is invalid. Georgia calls this a violation of states' rights. And the governor mobilized the Georgia militia and basically said, dear John Adams, our state is going to repel with force any attempt you make to void the earlier treaty. Don't care if you say it's no longer valid, run through your paper shredder. It's ours. It's legit, we're gonna keep it. So Adams says, oh crap. I really wanted to play fair here, but since you're gonna bully me, state of Georgia, I'll just back down. So he did. He backs off, backs down, abandons the Creeks to their fate. So the piece of this that I mostly want you to remember and file away for a future moment is the fact that John Quincy Adams gets a treaty on his desk and says, I gotta go look into this. And creates a new one because he wants to play fair with Native Americans. So we have a president of the United States who wants to deal fairly with Native Americans. We're gonna have a future president that has a very different view on relations with Native Americans. Okay, so election 1828. This is, as we're seeing more and more democracy develop, it just so happens that this one is the first presidential contest in which the popular vote of the people determined the outcome. That hadn't happened before. This time it does. And it's a big game changer. It's a major game changer. John Quincy Adams is called the last of the cocked hat presidents. Meaning, referring to the style of hat that the Revolutionary generation wore with because they were cocked hats. So he's considered the last cocked president, because Andrew Jackson is a totally different kind of dude. But, the election of 1828, it's the same two dudes, Adams and Jefferson, are facing off against each other, and, running for president. Okay. So, the spread of voting rights to nearly all white males, no matter how poor they were, brought a new type of politician to the forefront of things. That's Andrew Jackson. So he became a vocal advocate of the people's right to rule. So he fits, Andrew Jackson is like the perfect fit to come along at this moment in US history, as far as like what people are interested in seeing as a president. You know, what they envision the president should be like. So, 1828, new campaign styles. Engaging in campaign speeches, the rhetoric became, instead of ever so formal, becomes less formal, and quite blunt. Lots of nasty accusations thrown back and forth. In New York, a group of Jackson supporters controlled 50 newspapers. So, what we're seeing for the first time in 1828 is presidential campaigns coordinated in, in the national arena, right, across the nation. So, also election 1828, scandal and questions of character reign supreme. Like, instead of talking about issues, in other words, these guys are throwing accusations at each other, and it's all about scandals, character, etc. So, how do they do this? Andrew Jackson supporters portrayed Mr. Adams as an elitist, a monarchist. By this point in time, it is, in the United States, it is politically fatal to be labeled an aristocrat. There was a time when that was a good thing. It's like, okay, yeah, he's an aristocrat. 2 thumbs up. Not anymore. So, Jackson's crowd, that's what they're going for. Okay. And Jackson supporters are painting him as this tough American hero, right? You know, frontiersman, tough as nails, American hero type. And Adams supporters emphasized Andrew Jackson's violent temper. And that was true. Andrew Jackson did indeed have a violent temper. So they're pointing to that saying, y'all don't want this guy in office. Who's, if we had cars, this guy would have a serious road rage problem. Don't want him as president. And they're portraying Mr. Adams as this really smart, very pious guy, like highly educated, highly religious, and trying to say, this is the kind of dude you want to be your president. In the end, Mr. Jackson won. One of the things Jackson has going for him in 1828 that he did not have in 1824 is simply that Thomas Jefferson is dead. Thomas Jefferson is not around to offer commentary, negative commentary on Mr. Jackson. So, it plays to his favor. One of the things that Andrew Jackson does during the campaign is he tells people that he is the new Thomas Jefferson. He's like, I got a vision for the country. It's the same one as Thomas Jefferson's. I'm the new Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, meanwhile, was rolling in his grave going, oh my gosh, why couldn't I have lived to be 100? Anyway, one of the ways for us to easily see that times have changed, Inauguration Day party. It's very, very different from anything the nation had seen up to this point. Instead of a quiet dinner, for rich people only, $50 a plate meal where you eat something that came out of the ocean and is therefore not edible, Andrew Jackson says, hey guys, y'all are invited, dear America, having a party. Y'all show up at the White House, it's gonna be fun. Well, so they have like an endless supply of barrels of rum. That's what they're serving at this party. It had rained and rained and rained, so everything, like all the grounds outside the White House, muddy, nasty. But what these guys do, so they start to come into the White House, they decide that there are not enough doors. So they break in the windows, and so there's like people are pouring through all of the windows and the door, front door, and they're jumping on the couches, getting mud all over the furniture, breaking furniture. They're jostling waiters who are carrying around, trays with flutes of champagne. They are breaking china, really fancy china. They are, getting the 5-finger discount on a lot of White House stuff. They're just like, they're doing that kind of thing. And this is going on, and it gets to the point where one, it's so crowded, and two, so loud, that Andrew Jackson is like, I really wasn't expecting this many people to show up. I think it would be nice if I could leave. His buddies are like, dude, we can pull that off. So, Mr. Jackson and company very, very discreetly slip out the side door. Nobody notices. The president is gone. The dude whose party it is gone. And they still keep on drinking rum and partying and having a lovely time. Lovely time. So, meanwhile, the folks in the White House who are going, oh crap, we're in charge of cleaning this up when this party is over. So one of them finally gets smart. They roll the barrels of rum outside of the White House, and as if by magic, the crowd inside of the White House drifts out and follows the barrels of rum. So they have cleared out the White House. Now comes the whole go through and throw away all the broken furniture, clean the carpets, go buy new furniture phase. A lot of people, so this story, as you might suppose, gets nationally published, right? Everybody knows about it. Some people are kind of going, yeah, that's my kind of dude. But a lot of folks are like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Who the heck did we just elect? And they're kind of freaking out, going, not so sure that's what we wanted. Okay. This brings us, class, to the age of Jackson. Okay, the age of Jackson refers to a time period in American history. As you might suspect, historians have come up with this. Why is this time period named after Andrew Jackson? Because he is so very, very influential, changes the course of the nation. It's a game changer for the whole country. So, what does differ among historians is what years they want to put to this age. For example, your textbook says 1820 to 1840. If we want to take a very more precise view, we could say, okay, the age of Jackson goes from when he was elected president, fall of 1828, in through the end of, well, basically through the end of 1840, the presidential election of 1840, which is only 12 years. Your textbook likes 20 years, it makes it happier, whatever. Okay. Okay, when Jackson's presidency starts up, it's not like from day one, it's a divided presidency. Secretary of State Martin Van Buren on one side, and John C. Calhoun, the vice president, on the other. So John C. Calhoun has his followers, Martin Van Buren has his followers. Very quickly, Mr. Jackson sides with Martin Van Buren. He says, Martin Van Buren is my BFF. He decides he's not so thrilled about Calhoun, sorry. Calhoun does not give him warm, fuzzy feelings. Okay. So, Jackson's vision for the country is to have small-scale Anglo farmers flood into the West, spread out, turn the whole place into a whole bunch of farms. He feels like that will help, create more equality, spread democracy. He likes it. But he's got a problem. If he's going to carry out that vision, if he wants his vision to become reality, he must first remove the people living on those lands. Class, who's living on those lands?
Natives.
Yeah. So Andrew Jackson is like, I'm gonna have to remove some natives. So, this idea that Andrew Jackson is pushing is not new. After the Louisiana Purchase, the idea gradually emerged that, hey, we should move Native Americans, move all of them west of the Mississippi River. So there are some, we won't dive into the details, but there are various proposals over the years, and those never really go anywhere, but the point basically to consider is the fact that the idea is out there. It's hanging around. Jackson's like, okay, it's time to use that, put that into practice. So once again, class, Zebulon Pike and his silly map comes into play. Because Andrew Jackson and company firmly believe that no Anglos will ever want to settle in the quote, Great American Desert. So you will notice, once again, Zebulon Pike and his crappy map are back. So, therefore, according to Andrew Jackson, since the Anglos will never want that area, let's send natives to live there. Let's send all the natives over there. Think of it. So, Jackson is arguing, so he goes before Congress, right, and he argues that his policy was just, humane, and liberal. He paints himself as the dude saving Native Americans. He says, here in the East, they're in too close contact with Anglos. We're screwing up their culture, their life ways. We need to get them out of here. So, kind of interesting way of justifying removing Native Americans from their land, but that's what he did. So, it's an 1829 message to Congress where he brings this up. Congress responds quite quickly with the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Indian Removal Act of 1830. Congress, in creating this law, set aside $500,000 to carry out the removal of Native Americans. I figured that's their estimate. They're like, that's how much it's gonna cost, we'll go with that. One writer at the time had this to say. He's observing what's going on. He said, quote, "One would think that the guilt of African slavery was enough for the nation to bear, without the additional crime of injustice to the Aborigines." And thousands of northern white women signed petitions opposing the removal policy. However, it's there, as a general rule, their push against the removal policy is not exactly altruistic in nature. They mean well, clearly, but a lot of their petitions that they send to Andrew Jackson say, look, and they pick out the Cherokees living in Georgia as an example, and they say, look, the Cherokee Indians living in Georgia are well on their way to, basically they're saying, becoming like us. They're becoming Christians, some of them own their own slaves, they're like us, man. So don't be going after them, don't target those guys. They're sovereign people, they should stay on the land. Well, naturally, Mr. Jackson disagrees. He's like, no, nope. So, during Jackson's presidency, there were 94 removal treaties negotiated. You will want to write that down. During his presidency, 94 removal treaties negotiated. Class, that's a lot. That is a lot. And fairly early on in this process, or, 5 years into the process, he announced that his policy, the removal policy, had either been carried out successfully or was in the process of completion for all but a handful of tribes. Okay, so we're going to look at the experiences of a couple tribes. We're not going to talk about 94 tribes, but first let's go to the north. So, specifically Illinois Territory. 1832. The Sac and Fox people. What happens is the Sac and Fox people, under the leadership of a man named Black Hawk, get removed. Okay, so let me draw you a lovely map. Okay, as always, simplifying. Sac and Fox people live here. Part of the removal process, they get moved over to here. Problem, from their perspective, their crops are all over here. They've got crops growing over here. And over here, their new next door neighbors are their worst enemies. They've been enemies for centuries, the Sioux Indians. It's a lovely ass. So, the Sac and Fox people are like, this sucks. This new arrangement is terrible. And they're starving to death. They're that hungry. They're starving to death, and the Sioux Indians are threatening to wipe them out. And so they go, wait, I know, I got a plan. Let's go back across the river, go back here to our farm fields. We will eat, we will not starve to death, and we'll be relatively far away from the Sioux Indians. We'll at least have the barrier of the Mississippi River, which will be a pain in the butt for them to cross, so that will discourage them. So that's what the Sac and Fox people do under Black Hawk. They go back to their old lands, and they're harvesting their veggies and eating them. And Andrew Jackson is not amused. Neither are many of the Anglos in Illinois. So, what we end up with is a fairly short episode called the Black Hawk War. So, The Illinois militia, so after these guys go back to their native lands, right, the Illinois militia mobilized to expel them, they chased them into Wisconsin territory. Black Hawk was captured. 400 Indians were killed while they tried to escape back across the Mississippi River. So, this, like, the major episode in this was called the Battle of Bad Axe, August 1832. Frankly, the Black Hawk War might have been a teeny tiny footnote in history, except 30 years later, people looking back on it made it extra famous. Because the Black Hawk War featured 2 Kentucky natives fighting against the Native Americans. One of these, a little fellow named Abraham Lincoln, he was with the Kentucky militia. Jefferson Davis was U.S. Army, regular U.S. Army dude. So it is the forces going against the Sac and Fox people, regular U.S. Army, Kentucky military, and so they're pushing, and why does this become famous 30 years later? 30 years later puts us in 1862. Class, what was going on in the country in 1862? Civil War. And during that time, what were these 2 dudes doing? Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis.
Lincoln was the president of the Union, while Davis was the president of the Confederacy.
Yeah. So, that's why 30 years later, people are like, okay, this is weird. These guys are on opposite sides, they're on different teams, they're fighting against each other in the middle of a civil war, and look, 30 years ago, they were on the same team, fighting together. Someone trying to get in, they just making faces. Okay. Well, one of the things, class, that made removal in the North fairly simple was, for eons, Anglo settlement pattern had gone like this. That's not a big arrow. So, shoving Native Americans this way. So, to a considerable degree, it's just like almost more of the same, but military doing it instead of westward moving Anglo, so the process is accelerated, and you're saying, go like that. In the South, it gets a lot messier because Anglo settlement patterns went like this, more or less. And they sort of created a donut. So you've got Native Americans living here, and Native Americans all around, but there's this band, just make it into a ring, of Anglos. So it's going to be messier, more complicated to remove folks in the South. Okay. We will be talking about the Cherokee Indians next. The Cherokee Indians will serve as our people for the South. We will take